And I put links for the barbell spin also in the notes, which I emailed to you. Bam, we're live.
Cool. Sounds good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Paul, Vindicate, Jeremy Eat World, Rose View Photography, and those of you who are addicted to crack. The Sevan Podcast is
That's
like
me.
crack. I can't get enough.
Who doesn't love crack?
Andrew Hiller is like crack. I can't get enough. Were you sore from the heavy grace, Hiller?
No, sir.
No.
Nothing. It's pretty cool.
Wow.
Nothing.
There's a Sevan subclip station that is up on. If anyone would like to peep it, it was a really extraordinary thing that Andrew did. And then after the show, I talked to him. And I go, what do you think? He goes, I was scared shitless. And I was so stoked to hear that because it was fucking a ballsy move. Jeff Bacon.
I think Caleb afterwards, it's the first time I've done a jerk since I've had the elbow surgery comfortably. So that was pretty nice.
I want to tell you, it inspired me last night at about 10:30 at night. At about 10, I got on the assault bike, did 200 calories. And then at 10:30, I did Grace. I went overhead with 135 probably for the first time in over a year, and I did Grace. Yeah.
What was your time?
Slight buzz. I would prefer not to say.
Didn't you see your buddy Castro's video?
No.
It was in relation to the swimming workout that he did in Maxwell Hodge. My guy tried to put. I don't know if I can do it justice because it was rather long. I didn't finish it, so it had to do with whether or not if you time a workout, if it's considered CrossFit. I think is a good summation of it.
Time a workout.
If you don't time a workout, yeah. Did you see it, Brian?
I timed it.
What Dave had to say?
Yeah, what Dave had to say.
No, I didn't watch it. I have kind of an assumption.
Sevan, you'd be looking shiny today. I took a shower like I do every morning. I'm extremely exhausted. I ended up staying up way too late.
Did you dress up?
Say it again.
Did you dress up?
Dress up for what? Oh, no.
Party,
no. Yeah, I dressed up as Caleb. I want to make a couple things clear right off the bat. Do a little bit of house cleaning. Rogue did video appeals on every single overhead squat appeal that the athletes put in. Kudos to them for that. Hats off.
Yes and no, we'll talk about that more later on.
Okay. Kudos from me, maybe not so kudos from Brian. And just to be clear, we did speak quite a bit about the judge in the center lane, and I think we were very honest about it. And we were not. In summation at the end, we weren't criticizing her necessarily. We were just concerned with the inconsistencies between the center judge and other judges. Some of us were like, yeah, you know what? Maybe that hip isn't opening all the way, but look at everyone else. And so it's not an attack on the judge per se. It was we're making more of an observation. But Rose did
in general in a situation like that, when it's very obvious to everyone watching live and online that something different is happening in one lane than is happening in the rest of the lanes, that's what the head judge is there for. So the head judge is supposed to be aware of that and then make an evaluation or decision and say, is that judge making a bad call or an inconsistent call? And what can I do so that doesn't continue to happen? Because it should never be the case that whether the judge is making the right call or the wrong call, that just because you are put into a specific lane, that you're at a disadvantage relative to your other competitors.
If your goal is to make the competition fair,
which I believe it is,
right?
It always should be,
right, and I believe it is too. It's just I don't want to make any assumptions of what people think competition is and is not. Devesh Maharaj, Devesh. I always pick your comments just because I like to say your name. Did Brian make out with Saxon too? He sounds sick.
Wait,
Brian,
who else was he making out with?
Did I miss something?
Please inform of who else he was making out with.
Brian, did you kiss Saxon Panchik open mouth?
Well, it was, obviously we were speculating about something might be wrong with him. It didn't, I didn't necessarily think he would have a top 5 or even a top 10 finish at Rogue, but his overall finish was not what was concerning to me. It was just watching him work out. It didn't, it it was like watching Chandler Smith at the Granite Games this past year. I was like, that's not the guy that I'm used to seeing out on the competition floor. And, we didn't know if or what was going on with him. Now, after the fact, he has said that, he didn't have the energy that he's used to having in these workouts, and finds out that he was sick. And so, that makes sense to me.
I was pretty critical of him in relation to the handstand push-up workout, if I am not mistaken. And the other events, he usually kind of makes up some of that space, which would be like kind of his just pure strength movements, which is what JR was calling that workout, a strength test, the strict handstand push-up and dumbbell snatch. And you're right. Yeah, like the hill run workout, he should have done much better on that. Just pure conditioning and typical CrossFit stuff.
Caleb, if you scroll down on that, there's a link to actual Saxon Panchik's post in regards to that. I did send him a link this morning. He said his voice is pretty darn beat up, but that he would try to make it on for a few minutes. And I would just be curious what that was like for him when he realized it, how it set in. Did you talk to him at all over the weekend, Brian?
No, and Patrick Clark was having some interactions with some of the people from Proven, so I had asked him if he had a chance to bring it up, but they didn't say anything during the competition about it at all.
He said he never felt better going into the event, that he was just completely prepared, but sometimes life throws you a curveball. It became more clear to me each day that something wasn't right. Mentally, I was ready and hungry to compete, but physically my body was shutting down each event. The thought of withdrawing has never been a thought to cross my mind, so by the final day, I knew something was wrong. A positive COVID test isn't how I plan to leave the weekend. As an athlete, you tend to think getting sick won't affect you, but this is still a tough pill to swallow. I'm more impressed by him than ever, actually. That's pretty badass.
I hope he's on when I'm on. I have a question to ask him. It's nothing bad. It's a funny question, I think.
Okay. It was a pleasure meeting Brian this weekend. All the real media are real, authentic, and truly care about the community. Thanks for all you do. So many of you have sent us the nicest texts and emails and DMs, by the way. The support's been crazy. Dude, Saxon, what's up, brother?
What's going on, man?
Are you glistening? Is that sweat on you?
No, I just jumped in the shower.
All right. We were just looking at your post. Crazy, dude. Absolutely crazy, right?
Yeah, I mean, frustrating, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is.
Can you tell us when you first were when you finished the trail run, what place did you take on the trail run? Do you remember?
I took an 8th.
Was it setting in there as you crossed the finish line? Were you scratching your head or were you happy with that?
No, I woke up that day a little bit with a sore throat. And I had a little bit of a cough overnight, and I was just just traveling. It was cold and rainy there the one day. And I was just it's probably allergies or the weather or who knows what, you know what I mean? Just switching beds, dust, I don't know. But I thought that was my best effort in that. It was something that I was really working on as to rucking, running, and really just a lot of my conditioning. Excuse me. I thought I could have done a lot better in that workout, but again, in 8th place in something like that, isn't necessarily bad, but I wouldn't say it was great either.
And when you're in that competition mindset, when you get a sore throat or you might not feel good, do you just push that away? Are you hey, I don't even have time for those thoughts? You're just no.
Yeah, I mean,
stop.
I think every athlete's different. I mean, for me, I'm just hey, it is what it is. I'm going to want to continue competing no matter what, whether you have allergies, obviously, I didn't know that I had COVID. But whatever it is, you're going to continue competing, whether you have rolled an ankle or hurt your knee or sore back, you know what I mean? As an athlete, you're going to want to continue.
And then the second event, Brian, was what? What was the second event? That
was the ski bar, the log muscle up.
Okay. So then on that one, you take the field for that one. And is it any of it starting to creep into your brain, into your thoughts at all? Hey, something might not be right, or you weren't even going to allow that at that point?
Yeah, no, I mean, I wasn't thinking of that really at all over the entire weekend, really until Saturday evening when we got onto DT. I think those other events we saw weren't really metabolically there. I think I was missing, I was kind of really lethargical, that I feel moving with like purpose and urgency wasn't to where I expected it to be. But again, like just knowing like, hey, you're in competition, like maybe it's nerves, maybe it's, you know, I'm just sore from the run, like whatever it is. But again, really, I wasn't thinking that. I just felt very like just slow, lethargic. Again, like even in a workout like that, I know that I could have done better. But like, again, it wasn't like a terrible event either.
Did you have a headache?
That didn't really come until like Sunday. I would say like each day it started to progress significantly more and more. I'd really kind of peaked yesterday, I feel like. But I really didn't notice it until we got to Sunday, where I would say like we got more into like the CrossFit style stuff. Even Saturday night, like the DT where it's like heavy breathing. When we got to that, I was like, okay, like it's cold out. Like we sat there for a little bit, like biking, something that I've really worked on. I was like, and then I just got there and I hit the first 2 rounds like very hard. And I just felt like I just threshold out very quickly. And like to be like standing there with my hands on my knees on a barbell movement, I can understand like if my bike slowed down, which I think it did a little bit, but just to be standing there on something like that was just like very unusual. Again, I really didn't think too much of that. And then we came to Sunday and really, I would say that muscle up workout was like that peak where I was like, okay, let's just like try and like ease into each round, get a little bit faster. And I hit those first 2 rounds, like I think leading our heat. And I was like, okay, like let's roll. And then like I started to get up that hill and just felt like I like metabolically just wasn't there. And it was like round 3, I just like blacked out, peed my pants. And,
No shit.
Yeah, but it, like again,
on which movement? On which movement?
I don't even know. I think it was the like last set of muscle ups where it was like I did a single and then came down and then just knowing to like take off. Like I really don't remember the last 3 rounds in that workout.
Oh shit.
But I knew I just needed to make moves in order to like continue to try to move up the leaderboard. But like, and then just climbing that last hill, just felt like I was breathing through a straw.
So at that point, you knew something was wrong. That's pretty uncharacteristic. You were basically just like losing control of your body.
Right. Yeah. And the turnovers were so fast on Sunday just because they try and finish those days a little earlier that I was like, okay, we got one more. And race 225. I mean, that's something I've done before. And I was like, hey, this is my jam. And I think I got like 5 clean and jerks in and like just hands are on the knees, and to take dead last and something like that. And to like just be missing reps and just like really stand there. Like I was wheezing a lot on that workout, and like I walked off the floor and I was just like that, like this just isn't me. And like just something just feels really off.
So those someone on the show, and I apologize, it might have been said that the reason why you didn't do well
it was Hiller.
It was Hiller.
Someone on
the show said the reason you didn't do well at heavy grace is because you still have a prepubescent body. No, they weren't that harsh. They said that just
not mine.
They said that they were speculating that because you started CrossFit so young that you just weren't putting on the bulk and size necessarily of your brother and the muscle mass. That's just complete horseshit. That's just us
for sure
grasping at straws. Tell us, Saxon.
No,
for sure.
Get him.
You didn't use the word horse shit as well.
No, I mean I don't disagree. I did start at a very young age, and like I think like the old motto of like weightlifting coming up was like a lot of like isolated movements where you're obviously able to work small muscle groups, big muscle groups, and really put on that size. That wasn't something that I really ever went through. 12 years old, I don't even think I had hair under my armpits, and I was doing CrossFit. And it was it was all that I knew. And I just continued that. And obviously it's stuff that like I'm continuing to like evaluate, and like that's a big goal for the off season is to be able to put on a little more muscle mass to increase. Like I would say specifically, like you look at the strict handstand push-ups. I need to focus on stronger shoulders, and you know what I mean? Like, and with that standard, it's just something that is just going to take a little more time and being able to isolate the shoulders more. You know what I mean? Like strict handstand push-ups weren't really
I don't know what you mean.
Like
you look buff as shit to me, so I have no idea what you mean.
Well, Saxon,
Saxon.
everything he's saying is, makes sense in line with what we were talking about. Is that there were some specific workouts over the course of the weekend that, like you said, barbell cycling, DT, so even the overhead squats, and then obviously the finale are stuff that I would always expect you to do very well in. And then when I look back at the end of the week, I'm like, man, like he didn't look right on the competition floor, and this doesn't look right on paper relative to who I know this guy to be.
Right. Yeah. And it, like I said, like, it's, I never want to be one full of excuses or things like that. Even like, it was something that I thought about, was like more of like, if I could walk away from that and be like, oh, hey, that was like, I truly feel like that was my best effort. And like that matches up to where my training was up to that point. Okay, cool. But like when that doesn't, and I know that, I just have to be honest with myself. And like, really, I felt like that started to come out more and more as the weekend went on, that like, hey, this isn't who I am.
Mr. Hiller.
You're strong as shit, Saxon. All right. So I remember the first time I ever stood next to you, I think Lollapalooza. You had no idea who the fuck I was, but you were
He still doesn't. He still doesn't.
He knows now. He just doesn't care.
He officially knows me as the guy who was talking shit on the live stream about his muscle mass. So the thing that I remember of you is you were with your brother your two brothers competing, and you had to do a 1-rep snatch on the Bayfront, and you hit something like 290 pounds. I remember you walked off the floor and you were like that narrow. I'm like, how in the fuck did he just pull that off? And that's like kind of been a lasting impression that I've had of you. And it's something that carried over into stuff like that strict handstand push-up. And it's just something I've always been wondering if you've been trying to throw on some muscle mass. I look at the quarterfinal workout, which was the other total. And if I had to guess, the thing that held you back would have been the bench press. Is that right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
And at which rate, that's clearly something you're probably working on, right? You already said shoulders and upper body pressing.
For sure. And I think just coming off of the games, like my big focus was like, hey, let's just like, I need to focus just on something, just knowing that, again, like that performance at the games wasn't what I expected. And so I just really focused on, instead of like really hitting a lot of my weaknesses, I focused on, being CrossFit well-rounded. So like, now it's time to like, okay, let's take that step back. Let's just focus on some other things, and let's focus on this next season. And that's just going to, again, come with time. I can't expect a bench 335 in 6 weeks. You know what I mean? Like it's a slow process and it takes time.
California hormones.
12 weeks.
12 weeks.
Saxon sounds like the complete opposite of yesterday's Starbucks employee. We did a piece yesterday on a Starbucks employee who was complaining that they're overworked and wasn't taking any responsibility. And this is an enormous compliment as Saxon takes ownership of everything, which is pretty damn impressive. Go ahead, Hiller.
One of the biggest critiques of Haley Adams is I think she's spoken about it in public about how she likes to keep on doing Metcons. Metcon is kind of what she's drawn to. And in relation to you putting on some mass, putting on some strength, have you seen your programming shift in that direction? Like away from your typical CrossFit Metcon and into some more typical powerlifting bodybuilding, or no?
Yeah,
as you're with Proven, I'm assuming Shane would be putting you down that path.
For sure, definitely. But like the big focus for me was being ready for Rogue. That like our turnover to Rogue was just so fast that like I wanted to continue to bring all of my CrossFit movements. I do think like going down that road, you might have to take a step back away from a lot of other things. But for me, I just wanted to see like where my foundation was, just being under a new program, new coach, new team, new environment. I wanted to see really like what that looked like. And I already obviously started those conversations with Shane as to like what the future is going to look like and training up to next year.
Clydesdale Media, Saxon is a class act. He will be back better than ever. Saxon, did you, are you home now or are you in your hotel?
No, I'm home.
How was the travel home? How did you flew home?
Yeah, I got back.
That's the last thing
Sunday
I'd want to
night.
do is go in a plane sick. That sucks. They pressurized that cabin at 9,000, right? Is that
weren't they arresting people for that at one point?
Did you get arrested?
No.
So do you think you've turned the corner with COVID? Do you feel any better?
I feel like yesterday was really the peak. I'm hoping that like last night was a hard time, just like sleeping and like just coughing a lot. So I'm hoping we're on the downcline where I'm starting to get better each day.
Overall, what were your thoughts on the event? The entire Rogue Invitational in the way Bill and Katie and gang treated you?
They always do a great job, and that's why always want to keep coming back. They take care of the athletes. They put the athletes first more than anything, and they hear you out and any concerns that you have. So for something like that, an event to be like ran like that for athletes, it's incredible.
Yeah, awesome. We received information saying that they listened to every single appeal on the overhead squat workout, and they ran them all. And I found that pretty consistent with what you're saying about them caring about the event.
Yeah, of course. They do a good job. It's I don't want to say it's a small team, but like compared to I think what you see at some of these other events, it's very the communication with them is very good. That nothing's ever misled to anybody.
Was there, from your perspective, was there any concern or problem with that they rushed you guys out there for the log lift a little earlier than originally planned?
I mean, yeah, we definitely got rushed, but I think I would rather be rushed on something like that than a 1-rep snatch or a 1-rep clean and jerk. I think like it's a log, you know what I mean? It's like you either can lift it or you can't.
More responsibility taken by Saxon Panchik.
I think maybe if we start a little lighter, I think 260 was significantly heavy. I think a lot of athletes were looking at each other. I mean, I know my PR up to that point was 245, and I was like, dang. Wow. All right, well, you're either gonna hit this or you're gonna miss it. Like it is what it is.
Ian Adams, what if there was a COVID games? Everyone gets it at the start of the week and see who wins. Well, we know who the champ would be. We're looking at him, the champion of the COVID games. Anything else for Mr. Panchik before we let him go back to his chicken soup?
Oh man, it's tough that happened, but commend you for sticking with it and trying to fight through and still giving your best.
Yeah, Saxon, you're the man, and thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it that you came on a lot.
Of course, thanks you guys.
For tolerating me.
All right, have a good one.
See you.
Saxon Panchik, wow.
He was and during the muscle up workout that he was talking about, I was making notes by round because I wanted to see, how often the leaders after rounds 1 or 2 would be passed over the course of the workout, and it was very infrequently. But one of the notes that I made was in the middle of round 5, Saxon falling back. And so that, it was, exactly like he was talking about. He was just falling off the pace, and those last couple of rounds were pretty difficult for him.
Taylor, did you let your kids trick or treat? They trick or treated their asses off. And then we were at a friend's house, and when we left late in the evening, they left all their candy there. What was interesting is my son Avi, when we got back to the house we were at, they didn't have any candy to give out, so he just put up his bucket and used his candy to give out to kids who came to the door. Beast.
I put a box of granola bars on the porch, and not one was taken.
Come on.
It was like a 100 box from Costco. I stuck them out there, and no one took one.
You're lucky I didn't come by. I'd have taken a shit in your bowl for that.
Granola bars.
You can. I don't take lightly what he said about passing out, but blacking out during those final rounds. I believe that is 100% true, and it's pretty impressive that he went on the peeing the pants. It's all. This is
one
amazing.
of the. I know he's not one of the oldest guys in the field, but he's one of the most experienced competitors that was out there. He has been around forever. Not only has he seen his brother do it, he's been doing it. And he competes off season. He competes in all the elements, all the movements, and it just everything adds up. It makes sense that this was not the Saxon Panchik that we usually see, and his attitude also is in line with the character that those guys have always had.
And unless he's an Academy Award-winning actor, he does seem sick as shit right now when we interviewed him.
I thought you were paying him $5 per cough.
Yes. Yes. Sevan, did you see the Senate committee report that a lab was the most likely origin of COVID? Tens of millions died. No one really cares. I did. And I continue to watch it. And it's just all it's just absolutely batshit crazy.
And Bush did 9/11.
Easy, Hiller. Just so you know, every time now, just because I just said that on the show, I will get now in YouTube something saying every single show we do, because it comes up in every single show, I get a little mark saying that this show has been flagged for monetization. I always put in a review. Kayla said, I've always put in a review, and I'd say 99% of the times we pass the review, YouTube says, okay, sorry, it was our bad. But every single time, as soon as you say that word, they have something that listens, and they ding us for it. They stop monetization on it right away until we ask for a manual review.
That's why Saxon put an asterisk in his post, probably.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's smarter. He's definitely smarter than me.
Or you could just, I don't want to say, you're aware of it too. You just don't care as much.
I guess, yeah. That's fair enough. There are some things that I would like to talk to Brian Friend about his biased reporting.
I got 1 minute.
At the Barbell Bend. Then I'll use this so you can help me attack Brian before he goes.
Let's attack Brian quick.
He said he uses the word to describe Justin Medeiros' behavior as I can't even find it in my notes. That he stole points. Is that the word you use, Brian?
Yep.
Is that appropriate? Why can't you just say that he worked hard? Why do you have to make it so dramatic? He stole points. Who did he? He didn't steal anything.
It's Hillary, you have any thoughts on that?
It kind of goes along with his pacing of workouts, no?
Look at by the way,
right at the end of every single workout, it seems like he's just right in the perfect spot to finish a place or two higher. And I'd have to say that's kind of what he's getting at, right, Brian?
Yeah.
In the process, Medeiros also, quote, stole. Brian looking for a little reprieve from my anger, close quote, points from the rest of the field. How dare you, Brian?
Oh, Patrick Bellner sure as shit didn't steal any points.
It's the concept. I'm not so much talking about Justin taking them away from the other person as that's my for the other competitor.
Say that one more time. You broke up pretty.
Optimus.
You broke up pretty bad, Brian. Say that again.
Did any better? Stop. Can you hear me?
No. Now we can, but you are breaking up pretty bad.
Should I come out and log back in?
No. Yeah, take another shot at it. Stole points. Action.
It's not so much. I'm more writing that from the perspective of the other athletes or the rest of the field. So if you think about the final event, for example, which is very memorable one, where Vellner, it looks like he has in sight what he needs, and then all of a sudden he doesn't. And who was it? It was Medeiros again coming in and taking that from him.
Hiller. So for your YouTube job, you don't.
Right?
For your YouTube job, you don't wear a shirt, but for your other jobs, you do wear a shirt.
Well, I'm about to go outside and drive to a client's house. So it's kind of cold here. I think it's 45 degrees or something. So
okay, I cut you off.
Chilly.
What was your response to Brian? What did you say in response?
When I read that, the best thing that I hear is Medeiros steals points and Bellner gives them away.
Okay.
Would you say that that's a good summation of it, Brian, or no?
Yeah, of the workouts in particular that I noticed this happening in this competition, in 4 of those workouts, Vellner was one of the guys bleeding the points. Sometimes he was the only guy.
Is Brian sick too?
I feel amazing, actually. Thank you. Jeez Louise.
All right. Andrew Hillard,
friends.
Thank you for coming on, brother. You the man. I really appreciate you giving us a bit of your morning. Thank you. Bye-bye. He said bye, Brian. I cut him off. Another quote in there.
Give me 1 sec. They're cutting the lawn out there. I'm going to close the window.
Okay, take your time. You can find Brian's articles at the at Barbell Bend. I don't think there's the in it. Oh, Bar Bend. Sorry, at Bar Bend. Why do I struggle with that so much? Barbend.com. I believe it would be accurate to say Brian is their senior writer there for all things CrossFit. He is there now permanently and full time. That is the place you want to be to get all your CrossFit daily news. And Brian is quite prolific. And the team is building there also at Bar Bend. Brian is over there as the senior writer, and he is assembling a team around him. And I think that is going to become more and more robust. If you go up to the hamburger in the left-hand corner, what you do is you click it, and a drop-down will come down, and you'll see CrossFit. And then you just click there, and you'll get loaded up on all sorts of good stuff.
Yeah, it was actually super nice this weekend because Patrick Clark's working over there with me now, and he was on the ground taking a lot of pictures for both strongman and CrossFit, but also writing kind of just like the recap events articles for each event. So that's like someone's got to do it, but it's more of the busy work. And so he was working his ass off this weekend, and that allowed me to kind of sit back, do this stuff with you guys, but also write some more in-depth or thoughtful pieces at the end of each day.
Just to address this barbell spin versus bar bend, if it wasn't for Brian, I wouldn't have even had the barbell spin on. Brian is actually quite generous with his resources, and he is actually the one who introduced me to J.R. Howell, Taylor Self. He's the one who suggested I have the guy on from barbell spin, John Young, etc. So I don't think Brian sees it as a versus. I think they see it as a place to team up and get the best recording out there.
No, I love it. And, there have been a lot of people who've reached out to me over the years that have some stuff to contribute. Some are more committed or dedicated to that. And some of them, a lot of the guys that you've mentioned, have just shown to be pretty knowledgeable and hardworking in those, in their areas of expertise. And I love having, the different perspectives. And in the case of barbell spin, he's really, really making a massive effort to get information out to you guys quickly. That's actually is a huge relief for me, because if we can get the information, that's great. Then we can think about it, talk about it, evaluate it, and put it into perspective for those that want to consume it, understand it. So I love the work that he's doing, and I think we're going to even be able to talk about some of the stuff he's done recently later on in this show.
Brian, throughout the week, I listening to you talk and listening to the rest of the guys talk. If I were to rank the events in terms of ones you like the most and ones you like the least, I think the one you liked the least was the dual event. And I think in general, a lot of people, and that was the one that was the rope climb, overhead squat. What was the last movement?
The sandbag carry across the finish line, maybe across the finish line, maybe not.
Yeah, exactly. Would you say that that's accurate?
I would say that Saturday in general, the events were my least favorite. Not necessarily from, they were my least favorite events. So this was the turtle, the dual, and the log lift, and I didn't like them all for various reasons. I mean, I should say that I didn't like them. I didn't like them relative to some of the other workouts for various reasons. So we can go through them in any order you want.
Which was your least favorite? And is it because of presentation, or is it because of the actual stimulus that was being tested? What
so
about
each
it?
One's a little bit different. So for the turtle, the reason I was so disappointed with the turtle was because when they put this out, this is something that we talked about throughout the weekend. Rogue likes to give some information, but not all of the information. So when they put out this workout, there are, we said there's a lot more unknowns than knowns here. And Katie was even encouraging of it. She's like, speculate away. That's what they want. So I love that they put this out here without all of the details, without all of the movement standards. What is a monkey bar traverse going to look like? Hill run bag pull? What is that exactly? And we talked about several different options of what that could be. And then when we saw it in action, what we got was the most basic version of a monkey bar traverse, once across on monkey bars we've seen twice before, that really was not very critical at all in the flow of the workout for 80% of the athletes. It didn't make any difference at all. No one got a no rep there. A couple of the athletes were a little bit slow across them, and that hurt them. But overall, it didn't factor into the workout very much. The hill run bag pull and it's called the turtle. So we're expecting to see a turtle, the bag called the turtle, that falls in line of the family that they've created of the snail and the slug and the pig and the worm and all these alpaca, all these animal implements that they've created. And I was excited to see a bag that looked like the shape of a turtle. We talked about it might have these kind of stubby appendages that the athletes could grab that could affect their grip, that could affect the monkey bar traverse on the way back. It didn't happen that way. The pulling of the bag up the hill, I did like that. I thought that was cool. But again, there was, it's kind of the opposite of the monkey bar traverse. 80% of the field appeared to do it at the same rate, and there was a small percentage of the field that was able to do it a little bit better. But when we looked at the totality of the workout, this was just a lunging race. There was very few athletes that came off the first lunge and then gave away any places in their heat relative, on the rest of the workout. So I was disappointed by this one because my expectations were so high that it could be so cool. I couldn't wait to see the monkey bars they built, and if that they were demanding, I was excited for the turtle bag and then what that meant to pull it up the hill and how that would affect the reverse trip. The athletes did say that the last lunge was tough, but we talked about it. 2 out of 40 athletes dropped the bar on the last lunge. So again, if you were in the lead after the first lunge, you basically held the lead. And I just didn't love it from that perspective. So that's what my disappointment was, I suppose, with the turtle.
Well said. All about event 5. Very well thought out, Brian. Jethro Cardona 3701. I love that number. Thanks for the coverage and the analysis for the games and Rogue. You all rock. Hiller friend for Prez, VP, Sevi for CEO. Event number 6.
This is the duel. So in general, if you're going to program an elimination style event, like, it's a risk. There's a risky element to programming that. And I think there are a lot of things that should be factored into that equation. First of all, if it's an elimination style event, which means that several athletes will have to do multiple rounds, it can't be a very long workout. 30 seconds to a minute is likely the maximum amount of time that the athletes are going to have. And therefore, the margins for error to separate themselves based on their fitness from the rest of the field is going to be small. And a lot of times what it turns into is not necessarily a test of who's the fittest, but it's a test of execution. We saw this at the games with the skill speed medley, and we've seen it at the games in many variations in the past. Usually and originally it was with a barbell, snatch speed ladder. And if you go back and watch the 2015 games or games documentary, you see that there are a lot of athletes that are certainly capable of snatching those weights, but they miss them. But it was obvious. You either missed it or you didn't, or you made it. There was no really gray area. It was really unlikely or rare that you saw someone hit a snatch, stand it up, think they'd made it, run over the bar, and then get called back for a no rep. So it was really, even though execution was a critical component, there wasn't a lot of grayness for the judge to impact the decision of whether you've done it or not. The legless rope climb here was fine. Legless rope climbs in general are a movement that it's quite obvious that the men are better than the women at those. And a lot of times in programming, you see that the men might have to do 4 and the women have to do 3. And I think that that's appropriate because I think it's just an understood thing. It happens with muscle ups also, where it's going to be more difficult for the women, and that's okay. And programs can recognize that. So I might have liked to see a little nuance here with the legless rope climb. And we talked about, well, maybe they do it seated from the ground. And even if you didn't want to do 2 legless rope climbs, if you'd made the men start on their butt and then have to go from the ground in the L-sit position, that could have been just a slight variation that would have allowed for someone in the men's division who's better at the legless rope climb or that variation of it to have a slight advantage. Most of the guys came off the legless rope climb, and most of the women relatively similarly. There were a few that were a little better, a few that were a little worse, but a lot of this workout came down to the overhead squats. So my first issue with the workout is the overhead squat being there, and that if you're going to put it there, you have to understand 135 and 95 is a lightweight for these athletes. There's no chance any of them are breaking, and they are racing through these reps. There are 10 reps there compared to 1 on one side and 1 carry on the other side. So it is the critical component of the workout. It's the opportunity for you to either separate, stay ahead, or pass someone that's slightly ahead of you. So they're going to be pushing it. And what that means is it's very demanding and difficult and critical for the judge. And so as the competition organizer, knowing that in this style of workout, with these 3 movements and that one right there in the middle, and there's only 5 athletes and it's on display in the middle of the field and everyone's watching it, you have got to be like a spot on the money, getting that right from the judging perspective so that the athletes have the chance to display their fitness and see whether they can advance or not into the next round. Seconds matter, which means reps matter, which means 1 rep could be the difference between your workout. And if you look at a guy like BKG, if anyone goes back and watches that, I think it was the second round. He had advanced through the first round. He gets into the second round. I think he's leading his heat. He gets a no rep or 2. I get 1 no rep, and it dropped him down 2 spots in his heat, and he didn't advance into the next 10 athletes. BKG historically is known as a fantastic mover. If you watch that back, this is what we talked about at the start of the show. I don't necessarily have a problem with the bad call, with the call. I'm not even saying it was a bad call. But I saw a lot of other athletes that were moving very similarly to that, more frequently than that, not getting no reps. So to your initial comment, if there were reviews coming in about the overhead squats and they were being reviewed, that's a good thing. But what wasn't being reviewed was the athletes in the other 4 lanes who were not getting bad call or not getting no reps and therefore would never appeal it. And so we were potentially retroactively looking at the ones who did get called for no reps, but we weren't retroactively looking at those that didn't. I had made an assumption that Rogue had taken a position of saying, we're not going to review the overhead squat because that's a subjective call on the field of play. That's not what they did. We've since learned that they did allow for review of those things, but they didn't allow for a review of the athletes that may have been getting reps that should never have been counted to begin with. That's the second problem. Go ahead.
I'd like to say something, point out something that two things in regards to just the lay of the workout in defense of Rogue. If it is going to be a duel, then I do appreciate the fact that they are just going to be sprints. I like the fact that it's going to be sprints that lead to the elimination. And to further Brian's point, if there was a premium put on execution for this workout, then the role of the judges is even elevated more to the highest level. And so if it is sort of a recipe for disaster when you have such a premium put on execution, and yet it's a judge who is then or lack of consistency in judging that's causing the outcome of the event to change. It's a tricky point. There's a fight between those two. There's a tension there.
But that's not where the problems with this workout in execution ended, because the last thing you have is sandbag carry to the finish. And the first thing that we talked about in the morning, because this was one of the events that was withheld until late on, and then Barbell Spin was able to give us an original version of it. We saw the sandbag weight carry change a little bit, but regardless, immediately upon seeing this workout, those of us that were a part of the coverage this weekend talked about, what does sandbag carry to the finish look like? Is a sandbag carry to the finish mean you pick up the sandbag and run it all the way across the line? Do you have to run it to a certain point and put it down and then continue across the line yourself? Is it when the sandbag crosses the line? Is it when the chip timer crosses the line? Do you have to show control over the line? Immediately upon seeing this workout, we recognize that would be critical, because this is going to be a race, because seconds and fractions of seconds will matter. We're not 100% sure of what the briefing was, which is this, again, something that we accept. Covering Rogue, watching Rogue, we know that they keep some things kind of private and withheld, and that's their liberty and totally fine. But the application on the field of play should be abundantly obvious to everyone watching what ends the workout. And in this case, that didn't happen at all. And even though all those other things were problematic, this to me is the biggest problem with this workout. We saw some people whose feet were behind the line and they let go of the bag and it crosses the line. We saw other people dive across the line head over heels. We saw others run across and demonstrate control the whole time, and we were never really told or sure, and still I don't know what the standard that was briefed was and what was supposed to happen on the field of play. The only assumption I can make at this point is that it was not executed consistently. And I would love to have someone from Rogue on to be able to answer that and enlighten us on that. But so far, from watching it live and watching it back, I don't know what the standard was to finish this workout, and I don't think that it was carried across evenly by all of the athletes who did it.
I'd like to read this comment here because I couldn't agree with it more. The ultimate compliment to you and the credibility of your show should be Katie coming on each day at Rogue. Solid by all. Dude, mind blowing to me.
Amazing.
Mind blowing. I would give the credibility to, all of that goes to Katie. Absolutely does nothing for her or the event, and just makes her vulnerable, and yet she took the time to do that, and we're all extremely thankful that she did that. She gave us her time every day, and you could tell that at the end she'd had a long day every time. So coming on, that was pretty impressive.
And if you and some of the people who are closest to her at Rogue, her husband Bill, Drake Sladke, who's one of the integral pieces of their team there, even put up posts on their Instagrams, commenting on how impressive she is as a leader, how hardworking she is. And I mean, she's working tirelessly in the buildup and throughout this competition. So to take a few minutes and come and do that is incredibly generous. So I appreciate that you guys recognize that too.
In the brief comms that I did have with Bill over the weekend, he did give Katie all the credit. when in the very brief, he made it clear that it was KD, and it's pretty impressive. The final event on that day, Brian, hi, how are you, Mr. Spin?
Doing well. Good morning.
We're talking, Brian, we're just talking through some of my least favorite events in terms of execution from the weekend, and it was basically all of Saturday. So we talked about the Turtle, and we talked about the Duel, and now we're talking about the Texas Oak.
Okay.
I was watching, agreed with pretty much everything you said.
Brian, tell me about the Oak. Why does this make it in your top 3 least favorite events?
Well, I mean, in the conversations we had with Katie, first of all, I think I could tell that there was a little bit of uncertainty about it. You know, she said, "I think we got the weights right," and it's, you know, I think one of the things that the sandbag ladder at the games was, it seemed like, particularly for the men, maybe they started a little light. Like everyone was hitting bags for a really long time. Few people were being dropped out. Here at Texas Oak, we had almost the opposite, where, I mean, a couple athletes in the men's field missed.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that. Brian Send and Brian Friend. I'm going to use that. That's it. That's official.
Where that, with, you know, a couple athletes missed the first lift altogether. I think Brian has these stats exactly. 5 men missed at 260, 6 more missed at 270. So you're basically 3 lifts in, and you've lost 14 out of 16 competitors. It's like, well, you probably should have started a little lighter. Additionally, factor in that they didn't get the full warm-up time, and you wonder if maybe they'd had a little bit more warm-up, if a couple of the guys might have hit a few of those weights. But none of that is the biggest issue I have with this this event. So first of all, from the perspective of the MCs who work very hard, and, you know, they have a long days, it is extremely tedious and difficult to be the person who is responsible for the call 3-2-1 lift, 3-2-1 rotate, and to be locked in and focused and dialed in and make sure that you don't miss that call no matter what the entire time. The reason being is because there's a lot going on. You know, it's exciting. There's lifting. And in this format, you didn't have to finish the lift by the time he said rotate. He could say 3-2-1 rotate, and if an athlete had just picked up the bar at the row part of rotate, they were allowed to continue the lift. The log lift takes a lot of time, you know, even relative to a barbell lifting. They have to get it up, get into that squat, work it up onto their shoulders, take a few breaths, compose themselves, get it overhead, stabilize. In the time that takes to happen, you know, time is still elapsing, and it's only 15 seconds from the time he says rotate to the time he says 3-3 for 3-2-1 lift. And he has to be watching that, because I guess there was also the potential that they could say hold, and then there would be a time to wait. So it's very demanding on him. And I know Larry Moss, and he takes that role on a lot at those competitions, and because a lot of the MCs are nervous to or don't want to. Like I said, it's very, very difficult and demanding. We did have a couple times in this workout where it didn't go as planned. Why not make it a pre-recording like they've done at the games? Take that pressure off of him. Let the MCs call the exciting parts of the event. And then if you need to hold, you just stop the tape recorder and you start it again when you're ready to go. And we eliminate the human error in that workout. What ended up happening is that there were a few times where athletes, because additionally, the log was meant to be replaced in the middle of the pads with the handles up for every heat of athletes every time they had a chance to go. And because the time was getting tight with athletes lifting past the rotate, and then athletes needed to start again on the lift, some of the athletes had to go out there and reset the logs for themselves, which took away from their opportunity to have a full 45 seconds to attempt the lift. And if you go back and watch that, there were a lot of athletes that hit their lift on their second attempt within that 45-second window. And taking 5 or 10 seconds away from them to have to reset the log by themselves was a disadvantage. And Brian, I think, has hopefully done a little bit of a research and looking into here. But in the case of Jeff Adler in particular on the 270-pound log, it might have cost him the win of the overall competition.
Yeah.
Hold, Brian Sen, hold that thought for a second. So you're telling me if there were 4 lanes with logs in them, or even 2, and the guy was still in the middle of his lift, the commentator would still say lift, what would the guy do behind him who was supposed to go? What would that guy do? What if I was behind someone and it said lift? Do I wait till the next round?
I think that this was when they would say hold, and then they would allow for an, unspecified amount of time to elapse before they would start the next one. but it didn't always.
Oh, okay.
happen
So all the
consistently.
guys would hold, even if one lane was still lifting, all the guys would hold.
Yeah, there was
Okay.
one moment in particular where they were saying hold, and everyone understood what they were saying except for Roman Krennikov, who doesn't speak the language. And he went out there. He was even riling up the crowd, and he went to approach his log, and they're like, hold, hold, hold. And his judge is like, hold. And then finally they got his attention, and he realized that he went back. So that was an unplanned sequence.
What concerns me about this is what we saw happen at the games with the bike. Especially when there's a lot of judges, right? So we never got a clear report. Were the judges telling the guys that they were done with 3 laps? Were they telling them to not come in? And so as soon as individual judges start working the event, things can get confusing. The fidelity coming to the athletes of what they should and shouldn't be doing gets less than perfect. Brian, Spin, what were you going to say before I interrupted you?
Yeah. So Brian had mentioned that Adler on the 270-pound log failed. And so I went back to the video this morning and looked at it. And so like you said, there was confusion about when to start. And you could see the other 3 athletes start to go, and Adler paused, and he didn't get to his log for 10 seconds. And the log was rolled up all the way to the front of the pads instead of to the middle, and the handles were upside down, facing the bottom. So he did not start his first attempt until 20 seconds into that 45-second time limit. He failed. He picked it up again 38 seconds in, and then he did not attempt to jerk it that time as well. Had he lifted that and gotten a successful lift, he would have moved up to 9th place, up 6 spots from 15, because he had the second fastest tiebreaker of all guys. That adds 30 points. He moves up to 745 points for the total, and he beats Medeiros by 10.
To win the event.
To win the competition.
To win the competition.
And $215,000.
Yeah. He didn't pass anybody, he didn't move anybody else down that mattered, but those 6 spots would have given him an additional 30 points, and he went from 715 up to 745. If that had happened.
Sorry, one more time. I know you said already. Why was he 10 seconds late to the log?
So there was confusion about whether or not their time started. And you can hear on the mic, 3, 2, 1, go. But all the athletes started looking at each other. 2 of them immediately went to the log. A third
Oh, is that when Noah went to the log and he was like looking around like, guys,
Yeah.
What are you doing? Are you guys coming or not?
It was Noah, Chandler. I can't remember the 4th. And yeah.
Okay. Wow.
It might be right before this one. Yeah, it was 10:37:06 is the start.
Do you think Adler knows this?
Yes. So, these people in the chat, please, Brian and I are not in competition with each other. We're helping each other. We're both trying to push the sport and the athletes' opportunities forward. Adler was the one who told me about this. And this morning I was doing a lot of different things to try to prepare for this show. And Brian has also done a lot of great work, which is why we invited him on this show. And so I called him and asked him if he could look into this specifically so we could get accurate information to see whether what Jeff had thought had happened had actually happened. And here we can see exactly this.
Okay, so and that's the point. Can you roll it back just a few seconds so we can see that? I do remember. Okay, so you see, if you just go back, even I know it's hard on a 4-hour timeline, but nice. Okay, watch Noah here go up and then look over. He's wondering why the other guys aren't. Look at, there's Noah on the left corner of your screen. Caleb is there, and he's looking back. Okay, and then the rest of the guys go. Okay, so there was some miscommunication there. In all fairness, though, Adler wasn't going to get that.
I completely disagree with that.
Okay.
As I said, well, we don't know for sure if he would have gotten it, but a lot of athletes were unsuccessful on attempt 1 and were successful on attempt 2 late in the time window. Keep in mind, the men had less time to warm up than they usually do. And, this is only his 2nd log lift of the event. That's why I would have liked to see maybe a start at a 240 or a 250 to get the guys some familiarity with a less familiar object, and also give them a chance to watch them do more than 1 or 2 lifts each. If you go back and watch the sandbag ladder from this summer, we saw that, Justin Medeiros looked relatively uncomfortable with the early sandbags and went on to do great. Ricky Garrard had never hit even 260 pounds. He went on to hit 330 pounds. They were figuring out as they go. These athletes adapt so well. That's why you see so many of them hitting the second lift, not the first lift. And
Brian, in that video, we never saw Adler even attempt a jerk in both attempts.
No.
Right. So, but all I'm saying here is, whether he would have hit it or not, he should have had the full opportunity of 45 seconds with the log placed in the center of the net with the handles up like everyone was supposed to have to see if he could do it. And the fact that he didn't get that, and that if he had gotten it, he would have won this competition outright, taking everything else out of the equation. That to me is not a great execution of this event.
And that is why we've deemed Saturday as the worst day of the competition based on those three workouts we just completely dissected. Do you agree with that, Mr. Spin? Saturday was your least favorite day?
100%. It was too slow. Like I think I made a comment. I went and coached a soccer game, came back, and only missed like a couple heats of the duel.
The methodical pacing of the athletes who did well. I'm trying to think. We talked about it in depth about Justin Medeiros' methodical pacing. I can't. It was definitely an interview Lauren Khalil did with Jason Hopper, and she basically he gave pacing high marks. Also, is why he won. I'm trying to remember which one did you, it was the handstand push-up event. He said he didn't plan on winning it, but it was just pacing. It all just came down to pacing that workout.
I mean, like that workout in particular, for most of the men, the 20 dumbbell snatches at 100 pounds is not going to be the make or break part of the workout. For most of us, it sounds like an impossible feat, but these guys are moving that dumbbell very well. Jason Hopper is incredibly strong. I'm sure he could do 20 touch and go with 100 if he wanted to, but there was no need to. The only thing you needed to do on that workout was make sure you didn't fail any of the strict deficit parallel handstand push-ups. And if you go back and watch it, Jason's execution was perfect on that workout. Medeiros' execution was perfect on that workout, and Vellner's was not. He gets in the last round with a lead. He misses a few reps. And that's what you had. Where you had another example of Medeiros stealing points from him late in a workout.
If you go into Sunday with Justin Medeiros, and you're winning, it's never safe, right? Is Justin Medeiros a Sunday guy?
Pull up the that article that I wrote about it. I want to make sure I get these right, but I'm pretty sure from 2021 games on Sunday, 2022 games on Sunday, and from Rogue 2021, there were 9 scored events, and in those 9 events, he never finished worse than 5th. He had a first, second, third, a third, fourth, fifth, second, fourth, fifth. Yeah, these right here. Come to this Sunday, and his best event finish of the 3 workouts was 5th. So this is the first time in those 4 major competitions, the 4 biggest competitions he's participated in the last 2 years, that he's had a chink in the armor on workouts on Sunday.
Laura Horvat, in 5 events, she got 495 points. She set a new rogue record, winning 3 consecutive events.
4.
It was 4 consecutive events.
Yeah.
Previously, it had only been 2. That being said, Tia Toomey has won 5 events at a Rogue Invitational. Thoughts on Laura's performance, Mr. Spin?
I mean, when she's strong, she's strong. Nobody can beat her, at least in this field. Obviously, Tia and Mal would have changed this, I think, significantly, or at least entered it into the equation a couple of these times. But I mean, just winning 4 alone, in an entire 10 events is quite impressive. But 4 in a row is even more stunning.
By the way, and I have a spreadsheet that has all of the event performances from all of Rogue Invitational, and I don't think she's ever won 5 in a season. I'm looking at 2019, and I see 1, 2, 3, 4 event wins. I'm looking at 2020, and I see 1, 2, 3, 4 event wins. In 2021, Tia had 1, 2 event wins. So I think this actually tied the most number of event wins in a single competition at Rogue.
Brian did say this in the article over at the Barbend, that it was open for Laura to win because Haley, Mal, and Tia were not there. Are you taking a little bit away from her victory, Brian?
If I did write that, I probably also should have included that, Brooke and Cristiano were there. Like, these are 5 of the 12 best women in the world over the last couple of years. No. I would never take anything away from someone's victory. Some of the comments on Instagram in response to this were like, yeah, they won because they had the most points. It's like, yeah, of course they won because they had the most points and they beat everyone else who was there. But I like to look a little bit deeper, understand what was it like to get there, because it's not always linear. Sometimes there's problems that come up. Sometimes there's things that are very impressive about their performances that lead to those results. Completely out of Laura's control. All you can do as you're an athlete is show up and compete against the athletes that are there. And that's what we always say when you ask me if would these guys have beaten Fraser? I don't know. He wasn't there. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant to the conversation. It's fun to talk about, but it takes absolutely nothing away from what Laura did this weekend.
Laura, go ahead.
What this does is it gives Laura some confidence going into it, right? She knows she can beat the rest of the other women. Now she has her eyes set on Tia heading into the next year.
I think she's also got her eyes set on Mal. I mean, I'm guessing, knowing Laura, that she is not very happy that she lost to Mal at the games this year.
Yeah, agreed.
Was it last year that Laura got no, it was in 2019. Laura got DQ'd for that event. She's pretty lucky that there was no minimum work requirement. And I'm wondering,
Didn't matter.
It didn't matter what.
So the minimum work requirement for the snatch and press, I am happy that they changed that this year. The only reason I'm happy that they changed it is because they didn't implement it for any of the weightlifting tests like the back squat or the log lift. But it wouldn't have mattered. She actually was able to do at least 1 rep. So when the minimum work requirement last time was 1 rep, so she would have been fine either way.
I want to go back to the event number. I think it was 5, the duel.
6.
Did anyone get no rep on the rope climb in either the men or the women's heats?
I don't think so.
Okay. Worth noting.
Can we, if you don't mind, Sevan, can we go to Brian's article about Vellner and sacrificing $188,000?
Sure. Okay. Sure. Yes. Let's do it. You want to go straight there now?
Yeah, because it's kind of in line with what we were talking about with Adler and the log lifting event, that a really, 1 or 2 reps could have potentially changed the outcome of the podium and the overall competition. And that he writes a really nice article here that details how costly, like literally costly, this was for Pat. But even it could have affected some of the other athletes' eventual finish. I think he's got some more information on that too.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this. Vellner was had finished his 25th rep, and he had the points he needed at that point. If it was 25, instead of 30 reps, he wins. He has Smith and Gudmundsson in between him and Medeiros, which gives him enough points to leapfrog Justin at the end. And then, as we all saw, go ahead.
But I just want to be clear. We're talking about the final event, and Brian Spin is explaining where Patrick Vellner made some errors or wasn't able to do he was basically looking like he was going to take first place. And Brian Spin is showing us where it fell apart at the very, very end. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So he was down. I think it was 10 going into the last 5 or 10 points. I
think he was down 5, but he needed 10.
10, yeah,
because he didn't have the tie break.
And he was on his way, and then he had that failed rep on number 26, and that cost him about 13 seconds or so. In that time, Chandler crossed the line. Medeiros went through, and you see Hopper, Gudmundsson, and Quant all passed Vellner in those last final seconds, last few reps. And so those 2 failed reps, if he would have been able to get those through, he would have been able to get enough points to pass Medeiros on that final workout.
And the detail there is he didn't fail the cleans. He failed shoulder to overhead every single time.
Yep. It looked the exact same fail both times too.
And it would have, and that the trickle down effect of that is also massive, because obviously if he wins the competition, then there's someone else who made the podium who misses out on the podium, and the financial jumps from first to second to third, and third to fourth were quite significant. It would have been really tight I think that it's even possible that Chandler and Jeff Adler would have tied on points, similar to Emma Lawson and Ellie Turner, and would have come down to a tie break. That also might have been skewed by Vellner's finish in that particular workout. And so, in multiple cases here, and it's not a bad thing. It's just something to kind of note and point out that this is how close the men's competition is right now. And even though Justin won again, and don't want to take anything away from him for doing that, a little bit of a nuance here with an execution from the event side in the log lift, a missed rep here from an execution on the performance side from Vellner, and things look quite different in terms of the overall podium. And so going into the 2023 season, obviously we still have some more off-season competitions that can give us additional information. But we're looking at, I think, even a more competitive and closely contested men's field than we had last year.
When we saw Danny Spiegel fail, she failed it, I believe, on her 30th rep as she was neck and neck with Olivia Kerstetter. I'm guessing that when she went for that lift, that she wasn't 100% sure she would get it. I wonder and Patrick Vellner failed his 25th rep, you're saying, or his 26th?
26th and 28th, I think it was.
So I wonder, has he spoken on where he was at in his confidence as he went for that 26th lift? Did he know he was pushing it?
I don't know specifically on that. I know he was basically just going to go for it. Probably attempt before he was completely ready, because he knew what he needed to do. I mean, he knew he had to get Medeiros and he had to have somebody in between him. So he couldn't just keep pace with Justin. He had to create some separation, and he had it. He had a two rep separation at that point and a couple guys in between him. And
I wonder how you practice that. Oh, here we go. I'm not going to lie. It stings right now, but I'll get over it. I made the decision to go for it, and I'm proud of that decision. I wonder, and he should be proud of it. I agree with him. How do you practice that in training? It seems like something so hard to practice, right? Because think where you have to go in order to practice attempting at failure, right? That means you first of all have to pick a workout and know before you start, hey, if I'm going to go, as I approach failure, I'm still going to pick it up and go. You think they practice this at all?
I would hope so. I mean, you hope that they're training, pushing their limits of how much they can go and how they feel. And if they're able to squeeze out another rep, especially on the competition floor.
I mean, I'm sure they do. Just last night at our gym, we had a workout. It was 20 cal bike, 20 clean and jerks, 20 cal bike. And I told even the classes, and these are just recreational athletes, I said, every one of you has some number in mind on that last set of 20 cal echo bikes where you're going to you have 5 left, 8 left, 10 left, whatever it is, and you're going to send it. You're just going to go for it and finish the workout hard. My challenge for you today is to add 2 calories to that. Instead of going at 5, go at 7. Instead of going at 10, going at 12. And if that's something that we're practicing and talking about here, it's insane to think that the elite athletes aren't also having opportunities created for them by their coaches in training to go for it a little bit more than you normally would, or to go into that zone of uncomfortability a little earlier than you'd want to. Felder went for it in the second set of 10. He was even with Justin after 10. He pulled ahead in the middle, and he was just trusting his fitness that he could hold on for the end. It didn't pay off for him this time, but I still commend him for doing it.
Do you think that there's any validity to this statement? Elisa Carr-Rideau, if they hadn't done the log the night before, Pat would have won that last event.
The thing that is notable is, we have seen Pat have a little bit of an exposure this season in terms of his shoulder to overhead pressing strength. We saw it at the games. We see it here. The last 4 workouts were the log lift, which is the pressed overhead is critical. Deficit strict handstand push-up, the press in the handstand push-up is critical. 49 ring muscle-ups, which he's amazing at, but you still have to press out of every rep of those ring muscle-ups. And then finally clean and jerks at the end, where it's the only thing that ever really stopped any of the athletes was the jerk. So 4 straight workouts at the end of this competition where pressing was being tested. It really hadn't been tested at all prior to that. Yes, there were some shoulder to overheads in DT, but they were pretty much negligible. And so the cumulative effect of those 3 other events leading into that certainly would affect not just Pat, but all of the athletes pressing strength and capacity. And in his case, it ended up costing him.
And those were 3 of his 4 worst events.
Were shoulder to overhead?
17th, 10th. He got first on the goblet, and then 10th on the final event. So
wow. How did he do in the handstand push-up event?
10th.
10th. Wow.
And he gave away some spots there too in the last round of handstand push-ups.
Despite her 19th place finish, Horvat average was better than Medeiros'. If you take all the events, 10 events, add up her scores, and then divide it by 10, she got a 5.8, and Justin Medeiros got a 6.3. I do believe I got that from Barbend, Brian's article at Barbend. The best ever. Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
Not the best ever, but last year.
Sorry. Last year. Go ahead. You do it.
This was kind of wild because, last year at this same competition, Tia and Medeiros both averaged better than a third place finish across the 7 scored events. I think there were 7 or maybe 8 last year. Were there 8 last year? Anyway,
7.
And Medeiros actually had a 2.25 average, which was better than Toomey's 2.75. Again, this is just lending to the conversation. We know in the case of the women, some of the top women were missing, and therefore it was, there was a little bit closer than we're used to seeing, where Tia generally has dominating performances. But Pat wrote about it in his Instagram, and all of the stats are pointing to the fact that the field is narrowing, is closing on Medeiros, and that it's really, really setting up for what should be an incredible 2023 season for the men.
Yeah, pretty amazing last year that Medeiros' average was 2.25 and Toomey's 2.75. Hats off to Justin for that. If you scroll down just a little bit more, you can see in the article, Brian continues to say, no single athlete managed a top 10 finish in every single event. It's hard to point to another CrossFit event in recent memory with such large swings back and forth. And at that point, if you were to you can piggyback off of that and go over to the barbell spin. It's almost like you could just add it to the next sentence here. Brian Spin says both the men's and women's leaderboards saw 4 different athletes atop the standing at some point over the weekend. And for Medeiros and Horvat, who both ended up the champions, both had 2 event finishes outside the top 10.
And then to add on to that, there were 8 different people on the men's side who were in the podium position throughout the weekend, and 7 on the women. So there were plenty of athletes that were.
What does that mean in the podium position? What does that
top
mean?
3.
Crazy. Brian, does that speak from a super high altitude perspective? Does that speak to how great the programming is? That just the breadth and depth of the programming?
It's different kind of programming. I talked to Bridges a little bit about it Sunday after the competition. But yeah, it is, first of all, there's only 20 athletes, and the scoring system is 5 points all the way across the board. So, and these are 20 of the best athletes in the world, especially in the men's field. So we're looking at very small margins for error that have very, very big implications on the leaderboard. I really cannot think of another competition of this caliber where we would see the leaders take 60-point hits and then make 70-point rebounds and then have 50-point drops. And it happened to Vellner, and it happened to Medeiros, and it happened to Roman, and obviously it happened to Laura. And it was wild. If nothing else, it makes for an incredible excitement and entertainment value for the fans.
I would like to show you a perfect example of passive aggressiveness. Why aren't we talking about Roman's bad event and the impact? I think what you mean to say, Adam, if you'd like to get along with your wife better, what you mean to say, or your husband, whichever, can we talk about Roman's bad event and the impact? Or please, because of course we can. So maybe even more poignant in your questioning if you'd like to become a world-class reporter like myself. Brian, any thoughts on, I don't even know what he's talking about, but I'm sure both of you guys do.
You do know what he's talking about because Snorri came on and enlightened us about this ring muscle up workout for Roman. He basically described it as a lack of ability to recruit energy and having a carb dump or something like that. Watching Roman do the ring muscle up workout was the only time in the weekend where he didn't look like the athlete, frankly, that we saw all throughout the entire competition at the games and throughout the Rogue Invitational. Someone might say, oh, well, he just didn't have the capacity to handle the volume of the programming. Could not disagree with that thought more. He finished second on heavy Grace right after that, and he showed that he had plenty of capacity at the games to have good performances on Sunday. So that makes sense. The reason why it's more difficult to assess how a good performance from him there might have affected the overall leaderboard is because if he was operating at max capacity, we don't know where he would have finished. But in the case of Adler, if he hit one lift, we know exactly where he would have finished. And if Vellner had hit 2 reps, we can project it much, much more closely where he would have finished. yeah, we could say, maybe Roman finishes 8th, but we don't know. Why couldn't he finish 3rd or 13th, even if he had a perfect run?
Brian Spin, do you believe this? Would Saxon Panchik use such an excuse? Do you believe that he didn't fuel up? He's not a fucking car.
You always compare the athletes to race cars.
I mean,
Come on, suck it up, Buttercup.
I mean, day 4, if you don't fuel yourself the previous 3 days, you can definitely feel it. And I know that these guys were feeling, I think they came in probably expecting 7, 8 events, and instead it was 10. There's never been a long trail run like this before. Vellner hadn't prepared, hadn't been running leading up to this. He finished 10th on the first event, something you wouldn't expect to see him that far down. So, if he had a certain training program ready, wasn't, maybe tapering as much as he normally would for like the games and didn't fuel, entering in Sunday, he could have been more beat up than we used to, compared to other athletes.
I didn't eat right and I lost the event. Okay.
But you know what? If, Roman does have a lot of competition experience. He has a very experienced coach in Nick Fowler. And it did seem bizarre. Watching that workout, something didn't look right with him. But you never know. Maybe something's not feeling good in the shoulder and he's struggling on the muscle. Maybe he's just beat down from the weekend. Maybe he's tired. When I look at the competitions that I've seen him compete and excel in, going all the way back to his regionals in 2018, to Dubai in 2019, where he took 3rd place to Fikowski and Vellner, looking at the games this past year, looking at Rogue Invitational, this workout stands out amongst the totality of the work that he's presented to us at the highest level as something that didn't look right. If it starts to happen over and over and he's regularly giving excuses, then I'm going to have less credibility or give him less credibility in that regard. But for this one, I'm going to take him at his word. I have no reason to believe that wasn't the case, especially considering the fact that he came back and got a 2nd place in the last workout.
A truer statement has never been said by Jay Hartle. Sevan, you just haven't trained hard enough to realize how drained you are when not eating. That is 100% true. But maybe is that a failure on Roman's fault, on his part or on his team's part? And maybe he should keep a Snicker bar in his bag.
I mean, yeah.
I'm joking, not joking.
No, fueling for competition is a critical component of it. We talk about it all the time, and that's what makes the games so significant. And it adds to the conversation of why we don't like to see cuts late in the competition for the most part, is because how you're able to manage in between events, in between days, will have an effect on what you're able to do in the events late in the competition. I would have to say, yes, that this is on him and his team, and something didn't happen as it could have or should have happened leading up to that event. He had a good performance on the one before. Well, it was not the best performance, actually, 12th. And he had a great performance right afterwards. And this looked like the anomaly. So, yeah, I would say that's something that they should look at. The
one caveat is I wonder if doing ring muscle ups in a capacity, amongst other elements is not his strength. And why I say that is you look at up and over. He finished 15th. In the games against 40 athletes, it doesn't look too bad. You finish 15th against this field and you lose the points. And I can't remember exactly if the muscle ups were what was the limiting factor for him, but
no, it's a great point. And I in an article I wrote for Morning Chalk Up that looked at both Roman and Ricky's performances over the course of the weekend. That was one of the workouts that stood out from the games as not being his best. And watching that workout back, he was giving away ground to the field on ring muscle ups. That workout we've talked about many times is I'm not so confident looking at that workout in a vacuum because of how critical the capital was in terms of affecting the athlete's potential performance on that workout. But it is now 2 workouts of the last 2 competitions that we've seen where he's had a bit of a slip on a high volume ring muscle up workout. He's competing at least 220 and possibly upwards of 230 pounds. And we talked about how, moving your body through space can be very difficult at that weight. And that may be something else to consider, an excellent point to bring up. And another thing that I'm sure his team will look at, because if he wants to achieve his goal, which is to win the CrossFit Games and to be the fittest on earth, he's going to need to do a little bit better on the ring muscle up workouts, whatever the problem was.
Coach Mike McElroy, Sevan, do a 10-minute assault bike test at the end of your weekly 24-hour fast, 36 hours, and compare it to another day when you're fueled normally. I do that, and your point is clear, and I hear you loudly, 100%. I just drag ass. So,
Sevan, are we going to?
Thank you.
Are we going to go to the other barbell spin article before?
Yeah, this is the best for last. This kind of talk right here is some of my favorite stuff in the space. Mr. Spin over at the Barbell Spin has done a look at what the correlates are, what workouts best, which events were most and least correlated to the overall standing.
First of all, obviously we can pull it up. It would be great. And I think,
Brian, thank you for doing this. Thank you.
And I think it would be also helpful, Brian, if you could kind of walk through the math or the process that you use to get these numbers on page.
Yeah,
exactly what I was thinking.
So for those who are not familiar with statistics, essentially the correlation is, if you take 1st through 20th place on the overall standings, you compare the finishes at every event. So if Medeiros was first overall, followed by Smith and Adler, all the way down, you would think that, say, Texas Trail to be a perfect correlation, you'd have the exact same finish in the event as you do in the overall standings. Obviously, the events, you have different rankings and things, and then they shake out to the best average. And so what this is looking at is you see Texas Trail, Ski Bar, Back Attack actually had the closest matchup between how the athletes finish in those events to how they finished overall standings. The Texas Oak and the Goblet.
For the men, by the way, he's speaking specifically about the men, the men. Go on. I apologize.
Versus the Texas Oak and the Goblet had the least correlation, which was almost, when you see something near a 0, it's kind of almost like a random piece, because you could have technically a -1 correlation on this, which would mean that if you finished first overall, you'd finish 20th in that event, and kind of reverse the order.
And that 0.07 on Texas Oak, that is a massive outlier. The next lowest one is 0.35.
Yeah. Can you? I wasn't able to follow how you did the math. How do you do the math for that?
So if you think about, just take the overall standings, 1st through 20th, right? A perfect correlation would be that same order is for the same order for the event.
So we look at event number 5, the turtle. Holy shit, it matches up 1 through 20 with the standings at the end of the day. Incredible. Perfect.
It would say 1.0, perfect correlation. They're the exact same. You could say that the turtle at that point would be, that is really the workout that kind of,
you would say it's a perfect predictor of overall finish, but it wasn't.
Yeah. Which, looking at this, it's really interesting, right? You think of Rogue as being the strength biased competition, where they're going to, throw out the heaviest weights out there, and obviously the guys that are the strongest are going to end up winning. So you'd think Texas Oak would be one of those that's there. I think, as Brian mentioned earlier in the show, there's quite a bit of issues with that. Could have started lower weight. And he mentioned it, only 5 weights were scored. 260 to 300 was the highest. And the top 2 was Roman and Chandler. So outside of that, there's 16 athletes that fell within 3 scored logs.
And, if you go back and listen to our pre-event conversation about that one, that was the thing we were most concerned with. We're like, okay, I hope that there's some way in here to have something that actually distinguishes these athletes from each other. And we were speculating about what the tie break might be. Brian has the stats on the tie break too. And basically, I think we're in agreement here that the tie break was not really appropriate for this particular event.
Oh, yeah. Why is that?
I mean, the jerry can, the separations were within hundredths of seconds, and you'd have 5, 6, 7 athletes on some of these logs, and then you're separating and placing them and ranking them based off of a 10-second jerry can sprint. It wasn't really a full test of strength, because if you have one mistake on the lift, you can
or the jerry can,
or the jerry can, you move back 6 spots.
Let me tell you why I think maybe it's not a good test, but it has nothing to do with the jerry can test. It has to do with the fact that there's only 4 logs and that you know that there's going to be a massive bottleneck regardless. There's going to be a shitload of ties. There's no way around it. And so that because of that, the more thought should have been put into the tiebreaker is what you're saying. If there were 10 logs, then maybe not. Then maybe the jerry can would have been fine.
I think if you had started at a lower weight and got,
or maybe had 5-pound jumps instead of 10.
Right.
Yeah.
What do I have no opinion on the Apple Watch. The new one is significantly cooler looking than the old one. It's really thick and robust. It's the first kind of man watch that they've ever made, but I don't need it. But when I went swimming the other day, it starts telling me how deep I am in the pool. I went 4 feet underwater with my kids. I don't know. I don't even know why I have it.
So you were completely submerged standing up?
Yes. I was 4 feet underwater in a 6-foot pool while standing. I don't have any. I'm not even a watch guy. I think watches are dumb. I have an iPhone. I don't know why, but it is thick and robust. And if you're a watch guy and there's features you want on it, don't fuck around with the other one. The screen's a little bigger. It is what it is. I'm not a I still don't understand how we got it. Maybe I'm going to need a lesson off air. And when I don't understand how the math is done, I understand what you're looking at. You explain that well, 1 through 20 versus if the workout were 1 through 20, but I don't know how good 0.72 is unless I know how the math is done, but I'll take your word on it. Is 1.2 pretty, is 0.72 pretty impressive? Like, holy shit. Wow. Or is it just because of the fact it's a run and it has such a strong, and what's the takeaway here? Should all the athletes be running more?
I mean, generally, you're going to see positive correlations on this just because at the end of the day that the athletes that are winning the overall competition are doing well in these events. So, you see in the women's side, the turtle was 0.83. I think you're going to generally see the ones that are most correlated are going to be in that 0.7, 0.8 range. I think there's too many specialist outliers, if you call them, that are going to go in on, and do well in certain events that are not going to make it closer to a 0.9 or 1.
And to this, just before you ask this next question, Brian mentioned that we would expect weightlifting tests to be strong correlates at Rogue. The reason being, if you look at all of the workouts that were tested, there were 4 monostructural implements integrated into the workouts. There were 7 gymnastics implements integrated into the 10 workouts. There were 15 weightlifting implements across those 10 workouts. So it's more than the gymnastics and the monostructural combined. And therefore you would expect events where you need to be strong or good at weightlifting movements to have high correlates. On the women's side, it's more along that lines. They're not all highlighted here, but DT with a spin, big weightlifting component. Turtle, the lunge was critical, weightlifting component. Texas Oak, obviously weightlifting. The dual, the overhead squat, we talked about as being critical. If not that, then it was a sandbag, both weightlifting. Heavy grace, all weightlifting. So this makes more sense than the men's relative to what the programming at Rogue is.
I would love to see this. I know there's no way we can, but if you would have had Tia, Mal, Brooke Wells, Christy, Arama Okano, Haley, if we would have had all of them in there, if it would have lined up more with the the boys numbers, being that the boys really had all the best guys in the world there and the women did not necessarily have that.
Impossible to do, but a great thought.
We talked about Pat Vellner losing $188,000. Still can't get over that. I wonder if he had to sleep on the floor. One of the other things in the article that Mr. Spin wrote is that in the Texas Oak, Adler, Medeiros, Vellner finished 15th, 16th, and 17th on that event. 4 athletes tied at the 260-pound log, 6 tied at 270 pounds, and 6 tied at 280 pounds. Mm-hmm. These are great articles, by the way. They're just dense with it's just all candy to me. It's all candy.
Yeah, this is amazing. And in the case of Adler, Medeiros, and Vellner, we know, and we don't know how much it necessarily impacted, that there was an element of each of them on the lift that they ended up being eliminated on, where the timing was confusing. To say it in no other way, it was confusing.
And there's 30 points up for grabs or more for each of these guys with one lift.
Last night in a semi-buzzed stupor, I got on the assault bike and I went over to Morning Chalk Up and I started watching all of Lauren Khalil's videos that I hadn't finished as she did a recap on the event. I'd like to bring up some of these things. Feel free to jump in, guys, and talk about. She does the short interviews with the athletes. They're little vignettes, anywhere from 1 to 4 minutes. At this point, some people are aware that Manon Anganese missed out on the semifinals in 2022 due to failure to submit a video. Oh, maybe that was from your article.
This is an article that I wrote that it might be up on Barbend already. Otherwise, it will be later today.
So my question is, what happened there? Why didn't she submit that video? I don't remember that story.
This was, and there isn't. If you search Manon Anganese Morning Chalk Up, you can read all about it. But there was a time change in the United States, the daylight savings time, that affected the submission window. And a few of the athletes, specifically Magnon and Jelle Hoste, both from Belgium,
wow,
didn't get their last workout submitted on time. If you look at her performance across the quarterfinal workouts, no question she would have made the semifinals. If you look at her performance historically, I mean, all the way back in 2018, she was 12th at regionals. Last year, she was 8th at one of the semifinals online. I think it was Lowlands Throwdown. She finished 6th in the last chance qualifier last year. She's competed at Dubai several times. We've never seen her at Rogue or Wadapalooza. We've never seen her at the games as an individual. I think everything in her resume, especially considering the fact that you don't have Annie Thorsdottir or Kristen Holte, Emma Tall, and Emily Lepinen, 4 of the 11 qualifying athletes from Europe women's field in 2021 in semifinals last year. She would have had a fantastic chance to make the games this year if she'd been able to compete at semifinals. Ultimately, it's on her. She didn't get it in on time, but because of that, we didn't get to see her compete at the semifinals or the games. She did do some off-season competitions. All of this will be in the article. She competed at French Throwdown. She was 10th. Madrid, she was 3rd. She qualified for Dubai. She'll be there. I think she qualified for Rogue. She was first in online qualifier for Rogue. And she did the best of the online qualifiers for the women, finishing 11th. So I talk a lot about her in the article, and basically all to say that next year in the super semifinal, Europe, she's going to be relevant in the equation for one of the potential game spots for the ladies.
This is not what happened with Annika Greer. Annika Greer, basically, hers was she thought she had uploaded it and she hadn't. And although for all the previous uploads she had followed the protocol, this one she was so excited she uploaded it and then turned her back to her phone. It is interesting. I'm not taking any responsibility away from Manon Anganese, but it is pretty brutal to have an online submission around an international or where some places are changing their clocks.
And I know that's been a problem back in the past.
That has to be avoided.
Years past in the open and stuff. Yeah.
That has to be avoided if you're an event organizer or that has to be avoided or don't tell people and give them an hour grace like they do in the UFC. They give you like a half-pound grace. There's got to be something that's not right. Jorge Fernandez last year placed 28th out of 37 at Wadapalooza, with his best finish being 15th.
That was on the I misread it. Should they improvised?
Oh, okay, good. On the improvised, you knew
it's not a
exactly where I was
workout
stuck. I was like, oh shit, what have I written
Thank
here?
you. It was called Dale. It was the second to last workout. There was a rain delay. They had to redo the workout. But the point about Jorge Fernandez is we have very little information or data of him competing at a high level as an individual. He's actually not that young. I think he's 29, but he's relatively young in terms of competition experience. His team did great this year. He had some great individual performances for his team at the games. We knew he was strong. I was excited to see him in this field. I took a risk and said I thought he might be able to do as well as 12th. He finished 13th. And so I just write about him a little bit here. I think that he will. I think their team intends to go back and run it as an individual as a team again next year to try to improve on their 3rd place finish, which they might have a good chance to do, but a lot's left to be determined on the team side with the new rules that we know about. Either way, I think that he will eventually try to make a run in the individual field. And so it's nice to see him here, to see kind of some of the things he could do. He had 4 pretty good workouts on some of the strength or maybe had 3 pretty good workouts on some of the strength focused events. But obviously, he also had to have the fitness to make it through the qualifier. So pretty good for him. And another guy just to kind of, he didn't get a lot of attention necessarily on the weekend, but to keep him on your radar, maybe not for next year an individual, but the year after that.
Go ahead.
That's what he's told me. He's the team's staying together for next year, and then if all goes well, he plans on making a run in 2024. I mean, he's only been doing CrossFit for 3 years.
Crazy. What's his background? Do you know?
Baseball. He actually tore a ligament in his elbow, throwing elbow, his junior year. Came back, did all kinds of rehab, pitched his senior year with that tear, and now he's doing CrossFit.
Crazy.
I think he played some football in high school as well. On Sunday night, I got a chance to see him, and he's like, dude, my body is destroyed. I can remember like 1 or 2 high school football games where I felt like this, and otherwise this is the worst I've ever felt after an athletic event.
He's a big dude. It's a lot of man to move around. Brian saves the show for the second time while I fumble around in my notes. Thank you, Brian. Jason Hopper from the interview he did with Lauren Khalil over at the Morning Chalk Up. He was saying that pacing and keep moving and breathe. That was his description of how he got through the handstand push-up workout. He says the back fatigue he feels is real. He did not expect to win. Is Hopper's was Matt Fraser a pacing genius?
I mean, you could say, you could say yes, but he was basically a genius at everything in terms of, competitive CrossFit. I haven't do
you think Hopper's getting significantly better is basically what I'm saying up there at HWPO. He also said in that interview, I know the first round is bait, meaning don't take the bait. Are we seeing a more mature Hopper? Is it like evident? Is anything standing out? Wow, he's real.
I mean, I would say 100%. I feel like he's evolving as an athlete every competition we see him. And it's, this competition is tough when you're looking at guys that are like 5 through 12. They don't get a lot of notoriety over the course of the weekend because we're regularly looking at the top guys. And but I think if you were to go back and watch as much of Hopper's weekend as you could see on the broadcast, I was watching him for several of the events, and I noticed little things that are significant improvements from what we saw even last year at Roger at the games. And I think that he's in the possibly the hands of the guy who's done it the best ever. And if he can communicate that effectively, and Jason can take what he's hearing and apply that into certain workouts, which it sounds like he definitely did on that snatch and press workout. Obviously, as he has some tremendous gifts and skills. He has a great athletic background. He has a very, very strong mindset and desire to be great at this. I think we're still going to see better and better versions of him to come.
Is he too big to be the CrossFit Games champion, Mr. Spin?
I don't know if it's that. He's just. I'm looking at his scores here. I mean, he had 2 event victories this weekend, but he's he got 19th on the second event with the log muscle ups. It feels like he needs to kind of shore up some of those weaknesses. I mean, I think he does well overall, but I mean, like a lot of these guys, it's where are you weak? What
I see with that poor performance there is that maybe something that he's not great at, and who knows if he'll ever be good at it, is adapting to the newness of things. That log muscle up, like, is it something that if he had a month to practice it, he would have done a lot better at, but just with the first chance at it, that's not a skill of his of figuring out really quickly on the fly. That's kind of, we'll have to get a little bit more data for him over the years to see that. But if that's the case, like, that's something that will be very difficult for Matt to teach him. And so, it's just
that would speak why he's here and Mal's not,
because the competition experience will go a long way for him. Yeah.
From the Morning Chalk Up, Lauren Khalil's interview with Alexis Raptis. Alexis says, we work with dumbbells a lot. I am wrecked and sore, and it feels like the CrossFit Games. The parallettes were narrow. And when she said that, I think she was insinuating they were too narrow for her. Maybe not. Maybe she wasn't insinuating that, but maybe just an observation. And she knew that she was rep for rep with Annie because she could hear the commentator. Any thoughts on her performance, gentlemen?
over the course of the weekend. I mean, yeah, so she falls in that range that I was just talking about, that 6 through 12 range where you can be doing actually very well over the course of the weekend and not get a ton of attention or spotlight on you. She reeled off event finishes of 2nd, 6th, 5th, 5th, 4th in a row in the middle of the competition. She finished 10th at the games. We've talked about her as being an athlete who can start to threaten into the top 10, maybe pushing towards top 5 equation at the games eventually. She's 23 or 24 years old. She's obviously in a training environment that's working very well for her with Adam Rogers at Training Think Tank. And yeah, like the string of 5 event finishes in a row of 6th or better against this field is a great thing for her and something that she can build again going forward. You weigh it against the other events, which are all basically 13th through 16th finishes. So she's not in the bottom, 25% of this field hardly at all, but there's certainly things there that she's going to want to improve upon. And again, similar to Hopper, similar age, similar experience level, this is a great experience for her that she can go back to the drawing board with her coach and her team and say, okay, we're doing pretty well on these things, and these are some areas that we're going to continue to push forward on.
Well said.
Patrick Vellner, the winner of the goblet, he says that the event was longer than you think. It required a lot of discipline. He knows he has good muscle ups, and that gave him confidence. He said he recovered on the run. He tried to relax his body and prepare when he was going downhill, and then just prepare himself for the transitions onto the flat surface. He was happy to pace off of Ricky for the first 4 rounds before Ricky sort of died off and faded away. The log put a lot of stress on his back. He said it was scary. He ran worst case scenarios through his head. He said he did hear a pop, but in the morning he was sore and not injured. And the Invitational became a war of attrition. Sounds like he's talking about the CrossFit Games.
I mean, I talked to quite a few athletes that said that they were more sore Sunday morning than they were on Sunday at the games.
Lauren, thank you for that fabulous interview with Pat Vellner. Emma Lawson, she also won the goblet, and she talked to Lauren Khalil. She loved the crowd and she loved the energy of the event, which is cool to hear from someone who's so young as she gets in front of more and more big crowds. She loved the ring muscle ups. The hill is big and tough, but not long. She also said she could recover on the way back down. And she said, I think she said she wasn't prepared for event 10, but she was out there having fun. It sounds like all the shit you want to hear, right?
Wow. I mean, yes, but also like it's cool that she's having fun on the final event, but like there was a lot on the line. She ended up winning the 3rd place, which is several tens of thousands of dollars by a tie break. Like if she's finished 1 spot worse on that, she loses out on the podium. She loses out. I mean, I know that some of
you mean the
athletes,
jerry can? Are you talking about the jerry can?
No, event 10, the heavy grades.
Okay.
She finished 13th. If she's 14th, she's off the podium. She loses how much money, Brian? Like
30 grand. 30 grand.
Yeah, it was 10. It was 10, 30 or 40 to 30.
Okay.
$10,000. And I know that in some of the athletes' contracts, if you win a major event, if you podium in a major event, there's some good incentives. There's more exposure. You get to stand up there. You're only 1 of 3 that get to do it. So it's great that she was having fun, but also like that's a moment to make sure that you finish the workout really well, get your best possible finish, and give yourself the best chance to stay on the podium. Because up to that point of the weekend, she'd been great. Coming into that event, I told you guys I was worried about her maintaining her spot on the podium. I thought that like 10th to 12th was very realistic finish for her. Ellie Turner, I thought, could have a top 3. Ellie took 4th. Emma took 13th, and it was almost enough.
Ricky takes 10th place at the 2022 Rogue Invitational. I don't think this means anything in regards to how he's going to be at the games. I think we're going to see him on the podium again at the games. Your guys' thought?
I mean, I think he's going to do better at the games than he did here. You just see so many more monostructural running type events that are paired with strength versus here where, he can kind of minimize that damage when there's more running, more, bike event in there.
The best thing about this picture? Roman. Look at that smile, man. That is so genuinely happy for his buddy.
Yeah, happy for Ricky. Yep.
That's very cool. Brian's right. Ricky his skill set will set up better for the games. Sevan, if you think he's going to podium next year or not, I don't know. I think that the programming, and in particular the ordering of the program this year at the games, was very favorable for him because he needed that confidence coming back into that environment. So he got off to a great start. He obviously held the leader jersey for a long time. But in the case of, I wrote about this with Laura and Mal, if you inverse the events, then Laura's in the lead for 4 or 5 events consecutively instead of Mal. She never has a placing after any individual event worse than 4th, and the narrative totally changes. We've heard Adrian Bosman say, guys, you think I put out all my tricks in year 1, but I have not. There's decades worth of ideas that are up in my head, and I'm going to bring some out in year 2, and I'm going to bring some out in year 3. And I think that, Ricky and Kotler's perspective following his coach, Justin Kotler, following this competition is exactly what it should be. This was a great learning opportunity for us. We got a ton of experience against the best field in a test that we knew might not be up our alley, but it's just going to light that fire to go back and improve in those things. I think he will need to improve on some of the things that he didn't excel at the games last year if he wants to come back on the podium this year, because I have a lot. I mean, look, like Jeff Adler has now earned the right to be in the podium conversation. Pat Vellner, I think, will come back and have a better games next year than last year. Who knows what Fikowski's going to do? Who knows if Sam Quant can replicate that performance or improve? We talked about the fact that Hopper is coming. Lazar Jukic is getting better. We might not see Guy this entire offseason. Will he have an opportunity to improve on some of those things? The men's field is so fun, so competitive, and so deep that nothing should be assumed in terms of who's going to make the podium next year.
And let's not forget about Samuel Cornway.
Yeah, and we won't get to see him at all as an individual this offseason, but certainly could be a factor. I don't know about podium, but I think a top 10 threat.
Finally, in closing, Lauren over at the Morning Chalk Up did an interview with Justin Medeiros. Like a wise man, he knows it's not over till it's over. He loves getting the competition experience. It is his first competition ever with 2 wins.
And
Wow.
It's the first competition that he's won where once he ascended to the overall lead, he gave it away and then took it back.
And that sounds like it's all good training for his mind, by the way. And it sounds also like Justin is done and we will not be seeing him again until the CrossFit Open.
I would say that's definitely true in terms of individual competition. There's always the chance that he'll have a fun experience with the team at Wadapalooza. So we'll see.
Interesting. Any final words from you, Mr. Spin?
I think this was great for the women to have a shot at showing what they can do without Tia and Brooke and Mal out there. I think it'll give Laura some more confidence heading into it. Same for Emma finishing on the podium. And on the men's side, I think it's going to be tight next year. This just shows that Justin's not unbeatable. A few places here or there, or a lift here or there, it's a different podium.
Blasphemy.
And since we haven't mentioned her the entire show, and she did take 2nd place overall, really cool to see Annie Thorsdottir back out in the individual field. Some people were concerned about, well, what would happen to her fitness or her competitive spirit or her capacity to hang with some of these younger women after not doing it this season. And here she is right in the mix, beating everyone but Laura Horvath. And we'll see what she decides to do next year. I have a suspicion, based on nothing other than that she'll go individual and she'll be right back in the conversation for top 5 at the games in 2023.
None of this would be possible. None of this would matter. We'd be all sitting at home with our thumbs in our ass if it weren't for Bill and Katie Henniger throwing this amazing event. There's nothing that we can possibly say that doesn't make this one of the greatest events in basically in the community all time. That I can say that with 100% confidence. We're so happy to be able to do this. We're so happy to just sit here in our chairs and be critical. Thank you for giving us something to talk about. Thanks for throwing in an event that's an inspiration to everyone who watches it. And we will see